You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. Glad to have you along for the ride. In February, later this month, the NFL world will descend upon us here in Indianapolis for, once again, the NFL Scouting Combine. They try to take it away, but just pull it right back in.
Saner minds
always prevail
because,
and they don't always in the world, but
here, I mean, we've had discussion whether is this the last year? I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah, it keeps happening, and they keep getting an extension.
1 year contract.
Aren't they bound through next year? I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that was the last deal.
There comes a point where you have to make plans for next year, and
Correct.
that time has passed, and so we're locked in for next year already. Our excess work here of getting a offensive lineman that played in Lafayette, Louisiana, for our local Lafayette affiliates down there. Want to see if we can get a shot with him. Well, at the same time, we have like first round picks up on stage, so we are split 27 different ways, but nevertheless,
I feel for you because I'm not.
We make it work, always do, and it's a crazy time. It's an event that is still a little bit like it's very chaotic. It's the most chaotic NFL event I think that I cover. I've never covered the Super Bowl.
Organized chaos.
It is
because they do a great job with it.
It is because there's so many guys who come here.
300. You talking players?
And
it's like 300 some players, and then over 1,000 media.
And then it's media. And GMs and coaches and
Jerry Jones with his bus.
Exactly. Like it is a madhouse, and Indy hosts it very, very well. And so I don't anticipate it leaving without a dramatic offer elsewhere. And
because it does, you see differing values, but what it brings economically to the city.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, for 7 or 8 days, the NFL is here,
right?
And it's downtown, and those people stay downtown.
Mm-hmm.
They eat downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So
and they have money in the NFL. They're not going to McDonald's.
They got some money to spend.
Maybe Steak and Shake or Shapiro's, but yeah, I'm sure Ruth's Chris and Herring Izzy's and all those get locked up.
If Chad Ochocinco was here, he'd go to McDonald's. But other than that, I don't know who else would. Plenty to talk about today, and we are approaching after the Combine is here. Free agency, the new league year starts in March, which is where
March 12th, I think it is.
Yes,
officially.
I think you're right. Teams need to get down to a certain cap number by the start of the new year. And at that point, free agents become literal free agents. I think there's a 2-day tampering period before then,
which
where
is really
the legal tampering,
which is really not tampering.
No,
you're allowed to do it.
Exactly. It is it is a contact period. But anyway, all that's coming in the future. But right now, guys, we're just starting to see the first waves of change, things that will impact teams on that date, if not before that date, as those teams start to look toward the future and say, our cap number is bad. We need to get down to this cap number.
I want to look it up. The Saints are
like 51 million. I
thought it was 54, but we're in the same ballpark.
Right.
They always do this, but it's at some point the bill comes due, and you can't, approach Taysom Hill and give him stupid numbers to try to make it work. At some point, it catches up with you.
Yes. Not every team can do the old Bobby Bonilla deal and pay Bobby Bonilla $1.4 million for the next 37 years in order to get under the salary cap, which is one of my favorite sports stories that there is. I know NFL teams can offer void years, and that's kind of how a lot of teams do it to players, and void years of a contract.
But that's funny money. That's really not money.
It is. Right. So it's complicated how it works, and from what I understand is like if a player gets a 4-year playing contract, you could offer him like 4 more void years after that, and kind of pay money up front in salary, in like signing bonus that is then directed to those years.
Over whatever it is.
Exactly.
I think the most you can spread it's 5 years over a contract, but still that's what you do. You're pushing money forward.
Exactly. And so you can have a better chance to win
you're
and
pushing
money
cap money
forward.
Further ahead.
And kind of taking a little bit away from yourself in the future in order to have a better opportunity right now. Anyway, all that to say,
if you do that with your house, they'll take your house.
Exactly, they would. But this is the NFL, and things work a little bit differently. 2 players' names have become kind of a focus of of this week in the NFL and when it comes to free agency and players moving from here to there in the offseason. We'll talk about both of them today. One of them is wide receiver Cooper Kupp, who posted that the Rams want to get rid of him and trade him. And he says that he didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to stay in LA. He wanted to finish his career with the Rams.
What's he, 31?
He's 31, turning 32 by the new season. And the other player is Myles Garrett, the defensive end, last year's NFL Defensive Player of the Year for the Cleveland Browns, who has had 14-plus sacks 4 years in a row, has established himself as, if not one of the top 3 pass rushers in the NFL currently, for sure. And Garrett, slightly different scenario, says he wants out of Cleveland. So Cooper Kupp says, I want to stay, but the Rams said, you're going. The Browns say, we have no interest in trading Myles Garrett.
All that means is come with your best offer.
Exactly. We're not giving you we're not listening to a 2 and a 3.
Right.
Or Anthony Richardson for Myles Garrett. That's not exactly
someone actually wrote that. I mean, realizing there'd be more involvement.
Right. But anyway, that is not exactly the path to trading for a multiple-time All-Pro and Defensive Player of the Year.
He's 29.
He's
probably got 4 more years of quality play.
There's a difference in a defensive end at 29 and a running back at 29, for the most part, unless your running back's name is Derrick Henry. And then maybe 39 is when we'll see him slow down. Who knows? But anyway, addressing these two, because obviously these names come up, guys, and Colts fans will be like, ooh, Myles Garrett would look really good with a horseshoe on his helmet.
And he would.
And he would look fantastic with a horseshoe on his helmet.
When he visited Lucas Oil Stadium.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, he did.
Unfortunately. Well, he was also going up against rookies, in recent years.
Blake Freeland game?
Blake Freeland.
Yeah, that was...
Like, you feel bad for Blake.
Sure.
Because you're a 4th-round rookie, and you're like, here you go, man. First start in the NFL.
Was it his first start or first game?
It was at least his first start.
Yeah.
It might have been his first action, too.
And they didn't give him much help.
No, they didn't. That just seems like a strange thing to do.
Putting your player in position to fail.
Exactly. But anyway, Myles Garrett expressed specifically in his request to be traded that he wants to go to a contender. He was saying basically, all these personal accolades, which he has just as many as any other defensive end, like I said, in recent years. They're all great, but he wants to compete for championships. He says, Lawrence Taylor, we remember him because of his 2 Super Bowls, which is in part true, yes. But we also remember Lawrence Taylor for being an absolute game wrecker and a game changer in terms of everything he did
the best defensive player ever.
Yes, that is what Bill Belichick would say.
He and the Reggie Whites, and it's a short list.
It is. And Garrett is possibly on his way to being among that same group, but he wants to be somewhere where he's winning and somewhere where he's still playing this time of year or competing to be playing in late January / early February. So that's his primary reason for wanting to leave Cleveland. And who could blame him with everything that has gone on with the Browns in recent years? Like they took a swing with Deshaun Watson. They tried. It has failed miserably. And it has put them...
To the surprise of not
too many people.
Not too many people,
right.
No.
Here's the deal, though. Like, maybe people here would be slightly surprised because Deshaun Watson played some of his best ball against the Indianapolis Colts.
That's a fair point.
Even in their 4-12 season, with him at the helm,
should have beat the Colts twice.
Should have beat the Colts twice, if not for Darius Shaq Leonard punching a ball out inside the 5-yard line. And then I think it was another late play, inside.
Watson fumbled the goal line.
Yes.
Kenny Moore or someone, either Kenny Moore poked it out or recovered it.
Yeah.
But they were both going in for touchdowns.
Both of them. To game-winning touchdowns.
Yeah,
late in the game, late in the 4th quarter, just lost the ball. And that's what those Colts teams were really good at, is taking out the ball, punching it out, getting it for the offense. And, you could knock Matt Eberflus's defense for sure for certain reasons, but like they were really, really good at taking the ball away. And they had some really special players at that, Shaq Leonard chief among them. Anyway, Myles Garrett would be fantastic, like I said, in Colts blue. But he wants to go to a contender. Are the Colts a contender?
No.
I would say not.
No,
right now, no.
They are not. As much as you out there love your Colts and want to see them as a contender, if a player says, I want to go to a contender, they mean the Bills.
Mhm.
They mean the Ravens.
Detroit.
They mean Detroit.
Yep.
They mean
Dallas,
the Chiefs.
maybe. I
Well,
don't know.
Dallas is still a team that has not been in the NFC Championship for the longest in the NFC.
I mean, Philly, the Chargers,
Exactly.
one of those types.
All
of
of those teams, that are actually playoff teams.
Right.
The Texans, perhaps, as a
Absolutely.
Although they're loaded at
They
rush
are.
in, but
They are,
but
yes.
still.
But I mean, the type of
no,
team.
exactly,
type of team, yep.
exactly.
So you're not thinking about a team that has not made the playoffs in the past 4 seasons. You're not talking about a team that has not won its division in 10 plus years. You're not talking about a team that every other team in the division has won it multiple times, and that includes the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Who are an absolute mess.
Since the last time you won the division.
Right.
So Myles Garrett, I'll save you the drama, does not want to come and play for the Indianapolis Colts.
Right.
So, but that being said, I don't think he has a no trade clause because I was looking at this. I was trying to find if he did. I couldn't find that he did.
And he's got 2 years to go in his contract, I think.
Right. He has 2 years to go. Hang on.
But the no trade thing is a big deal that he does not have.
It is. So if you're saying if Myles Garrett's out there saying I want to play for a contender, blah blah blah, and the Browns are saying, well, we don't want to trade you. If Garrett just says I'm not going to play for you, they could work a trade with the Colts. Like if the Colts offer them the best deal, maybe they would want that. But then the Colts would need assurance that Garrett would play for them.
Right.
That's almost his no trade.
It is.
Insurance.
That's his no trade clause.
You could trade me there, but I'm not re-signing with him in 2 years.
Exactly. Or I'm going to hold out because I don't want to play. I've said I want to play for a contender,
Right.
and whatever it might be. So yeah, with Garrett's contract, here's his deal specifically. In recent years, the Browns have obviously been aggressive in getting their contracts to free up short-term cap space and push things toward the future. The deal with Deshaun Watson, big part of that. If they traded Myles Garrett before June 1st, that's another important date in the NFL offseason, the old pre-June 1st, post-June 1st cut. If they trade him before June 1st, that would bring a dead cap charge of $36 million to the Browns. So, ouch, first of all.
On top of Deshaun Watson's dead money.
Right.
His
Right,
dead money
yeah,
if they're trying to get rid of. A post-June 1st trade would still come with a dead cap charge of $14.8 million, and also at that time a cap savings of $5 million. So it's a little bit of both worlds, but it's still a dead cap charge. So the best thing for them is to do nothing right now.
Yep. Sit and wait on it.
Exactly. Why would you get rid of him if your dead cap charge is going to be $36 million right now if you're trading him before June 1st?
Yeah, I mentioned Watson's dead money. Not dead money, but money is going to be carried for not playing this year because of the Achilles.
Correct. So there's a good chance that he does not play, if not this entire year, for a long time this year, because of his injury status. The Browns are already way over the salary cap, but they also can carry some over like $50 million from this year to next year. So they're not in the worst. They're not in the Saints position right now, who I believe are the worst position in the league.
$50 million over the cap.
And again, if you wanted to trade for Myles Garrett, here's what some players have done in recent years. Just last offseason, the New York Giants traded for Brian Burns, the edge rusher with the Carolina Panthers, who is not in the same league as Myles Garrett.
No.
Very good player.
Very good player, but yeah, not Myles Garrett.
Not 14-plus sacks 4 years in a row, not Defensive Player of the Year, not All-Pro, not that. They traded a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and they swapped fifth-round picks. So it's basically a second and a fifth-round pick.
Cool.
Like the pick swap in the fifth round.
That's what the Colts gave up or got for Marshall Faulk back when they traded him to the Rams.
Yep.
A 2 and a 5.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. A 2 and a 5 for Brian Burns. Now, you go back a couple more years. In 2018, 27-year-old Khalil Mack was traded from the Raiders to the Bears. That's a little bit more of an apples-to-apples comparison.
I think so.
As Mack was probably the best, if not one of the top 3
at
rush
that point.
ends at that point in the NFL. The Raiders received for Khalil Mack 2 first-round picks, a third and a sixth. For Mack, a second and a fifth. So you got 2 first-round picks. You traded 2 first-round picks, and you got, in order to move up from a third to a second and a fifth to a sixth, basically. So you moved up a little bit later in the draft, but you gave away 2 first-round picks in order to bring in Khalil Mack. And that really seems like the type of deal that you would need for a Myles Garrett level player. You need multiple first-round picks, and then after that, you can have a discussion. And that's what all the moving around late in the draft, that's maybe other players involved in the deal. That's what that would entail. But you
Mac
start
was 26 at the time.
You start the discussion at 2 first-round picks.
Yes.
And if you don't say that, Andrew Berry, the GM for Cleveland, isn't taking your call.
Not even going to listen to you. It'll be like when the Colts were trying to make that draft day trade.
Yeah,
nah.
just not going to happen.
Just not enough.
It's not worth it to them.
But then the second part is you've got to be willing to if not right away, then soon renegotiate.
Right.
Yep. Got to open up the bank account.
And I think right now the highest paid is one of the Bows is at $34 million a year.
Right.
So that's your starting point.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you look at him right now, like his cap hit in 2025 is $19.7 million, and it's only $20.3 in 2026. Like you get Myles Garrett for that money, that's fantastic.
Right.
You know, in 2020, he signed this 4-year extension that made him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. But right now, it's a fantastic deal. You get one of the best edge rushers in the NFL for $20 million.
Yep, because that line always goes up, which means by the time you do that in a few years, then that's a pretty attractive deal.
In 2 years, he's going to be signing something for $35, $40 million a year for the next 3 years.
So that's where it's easy to sit there and say, well, yeah, I'd trade. I'd give up 2 first-round picks for him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a lot of teams will.
Mm-hmm.
But then are you going to make him the highest paid defensive player? I saw where a lot of guys are pushing Detroit because how close they are.
Mm-hmm.
They got Hutchinson, and he's still on his rookie deal. Is he played 2 years?
I think only 2 years. He was the same class as Trayvon Walker, right, to Jacksonville. So he's played 2 years, I believe.
So he will be back this year.
Yeah.
And in 2 years, you're going to pay him $35 million a year, and they just redid a ton of guys. So you have to make sure that you can make it work. I realize you do whatever you can to add a great player. I would push more if it's a quarterback that I can get the Josh Allens and all this. But if we saw what a defensive player can do. The Colts couldn't block him, and that included special teams.
Yep, he wrecked the game.
Right. Yep. So again, those are so rare. Again, talking to Rick Venturi, it's always about are your top 6 guys better than the other team's top 6 guys. I don't care how deep your roster is, just as important. But it's all about, can your guy wreck 3 or 4 plays? Can he just in 3 or 4 plays wreck a game? And this guy can.
Right. Absolutely. So that's I think a good place to cap our discussion on Myles Garrett.
Yep.
And it all comes back to
the only way he comes here is if he's driving somewhere and he goes through Indy.
He goes on the way.
On the way to St. Louis.
He stops on the way.
Right.
Exactly. He needs gas.
Right.
He stops in for maybe he's coming when the new Wawa is open in Noblesville, and he wants to stop off for some nice Wawa on his way to Kansas City, if he's going out west or something like that. So anyway, all that to say, Myles Garrett, very unlikely for those specific reasons. Cooper Kupp, second
much
player
more interesting
on our list. Yes, I believe it is. And again, I looked up trying to find if he has a no-trade clause. I could not find if he has a no-trade clause. And he did not want to leave the Rams, like he said. I have no reason to believe that he's lying in posting that, not just to come off as appealing to the fan base. He seemed like he really liked it there and enjoyed his time there, and certainly was successful there in 2021, winning the Triple Crown as a wide receiver, 145 catches, 1,900 plus yards, and a zillion touchdowns. I forget exactly how many it was, but it was close to 20. I know it was 15 plus. But anyway, Cooper Kupp on the trading block. The Rams want to maximize what they get back. The Colts are also in the AFC. That is a good reason to send him to an AFC team. The Commanders might want a nice receiver to pair with Terry McLaurin and give Jaden Daniels something else.
They got the most cap space of any team.
Yes, they do. They have a ton. I know the Patriots also have a ton of cap space too, and they might want
maybe the Patriots have
a young,
but Washington. Yes, you're right.
They both have a significant amount. But the Patriots are a team that would love him too to pair with Drake May.
You got your young quarterback. Get him a weapon.
So here's the deal. Like you have teams like that with a lot of cap space. You have teams like Denver that want to get someone for Bo Nix. You have teams like Baltimore and Buffalo that need to take the next step.
Always need a weapon.
That keep trying to take that next step over the dang blasted Chiefs in the AFC. And then you have the Colts. They're in the middle somewhere. Stuck in the middle. With you.
For sure.
How do you take the next step yourself? Maybe it is getting a guy like Cooper Kupp, but there are other teams that have great reason to trade for him too. So my point is, you need to be the best at this trade for a guy that is obviously on the block. DeForest Buckner, back in 2020, yeah, was on the block because it's not quite as famously as these guys are, but San Francisco was trying to get rid of players that they knew they would have to sign because they had some cap issues in the future that were coming up.
And they had other players that they were going to re-sign.
They were prioritizing, right. So the Colts, at that point, made the best offer for Buckner. And they had a legitimate reason to. Chris Ballard loves him, the trenches, And that position, super important for the Matt Eberflus defense. They talked about it all the time. The defensive tackle, the 3 technique, the weak side linebacker, Shaq Leonard,
and
the nickel cornerback, Kenny Moore. All the action in that defense flows toward those 3 players.
And it worked.
So it did. So getting a standout player at that position was super important, both for Chris Ballard and for the defensive coach at the time, Matt Eberflus. How important is it to get a 32-year-old wide receiver, he will be 32 by the time the season comes, who has been injured the past couple years?
I think he's missed 18 games since his Triple Crown season.
Yep. He has played a full regular season slate just twice in his 8 seasons, in fact, in the NFL. So how much do you want to be the best offer for that player? Can you make an argument for doing it for your team?
I can argue, but not strongly. That's of the positions going into this offseason, that's 5th or 6th for me. And again, he's going to be 32. He's been injured. And he's going to cost you, unless you renegotiate, which if I'm a player, I'm not going to give up money.
Right.
He's going to cost you about $20 million.
So he's according to SpotRack, he counts $29.7 million against the cap this year, and $27.3
that's with the Rams
next year.
Or that's with the Rams.
With the Rams.
So that the team that gets him won't get the 29 because that includes bonuses and all that stuff. So I thought it
might be down to 20-ish.
I thought his base was like 19.
Okay.
And like $5 million is guaranteed.
I just saw the one number, and that's what I copied down here. I don't know everything about the salary cap. I know a little bit about the salary cap. And,
I'll look while you're while you're.
So anyway, I'll continue our discussion with Cooper Kupp. He last year he had 67 catches for 710 yards and 6 touchdowns. Those numbers aren't great, but he only played 12 games again because he was injured. It was the 3rd straight season that he missed time due to injury. And like you said, Chap has lost 18 games since 2022, since he had that spectacular year.
Offensive Player of the Year when it almost went to JT.
Yep, it's true. So he beat out JT, and JT's fantastic season. Looking at last year's top receivers in the NFL, Matt, even if you say, hey, Cooper Kupp is going to be healthy entirely next year. He's back. He's better than ever. He's going to be the best the 32-year-old receiver can be. Last year in the NFL, the top 11 receivers were all less than 30 years old in terms of catches, yards, touchdowns, kind of put them together. I was looking at like fantasy totals or whatever. Like the next one, the number 12 on this list was Travis Kelce. So a tight end right there, who is 35 years old himself. Plays a slightly different position, different things expected of him. The highest receiver at 32 years old, 18th on this list, was Devontae Adams. And the numbers that he had were 1,063 yards, 8 touchdowns. So that's what you're getting if you're trading for Cooper Kupp.
He's due $20 million.
He's due 20. There you go, $20 million.
The 29 is it's all
it's
that
the Rams
month.
number with the funny money and
right, but not really. Yeah,
not fun, not as funny.
It's prorated bonuses.
Right, maybe it's a he instead of
which that team's already paid.
Right. He's already got that. Right. But you're going to get a 32-year-old guy for $20 million.
Right. The next player, 32 years old or older, Davante Adams, like I said, 18th on this list. Keenan Allen down on number 32 on this list of receivers in the NFL at 70 catches, 744 yards, 7 touchdowns last year. So you're paying if you want Cooper Kupp and he plays every game, his ceiling is where Davante Adams is to me. Like 80 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like
I'd take that.
That's good.
Right.
Like, do the Colts need that? And that's my question. Michael Pittman is that to me. You have that.
You've got Reggie Wayne once compared Michael Pittman to Keenan Allen.
Right.
Very good player.
Very good.
Very
player.
good. Very, very good player.
Like you have, and that's my point. And that's kind of what I've talked about the past couple of weeks here on the podcast is if you want to do something different, you need different type players. Like, do you want to trade for something you already have? How much does that really add to your receiving core? Like if you add Cooper Kupp in there, what is he taking away from? He'll take some away from
Mitchell.
He'll take some specifically, yes.
Mm-hmm. He'll take it away from
Mitchell. And so then you just say, Mitchell, you're basically done. Alec Pierce still has his role. Josh Downs has his role. You take a ton away from Mitchell and probably take a little bit away from Pittman too, because that's kind of what his role is. Like it's not the dynamic. Like these top receivers, the top, like I mentioned earlier, guys who are more game wreckers, game changers. So can you trade for Cooper Kupp? Sure. Will he make your offense better? I think he will.
And it won't cost you a ton.
It's not going to cost you a ton.
In draft capital.
I don't. My point here is I don't think it's that dramatic a move to make you dramatically better.
If you're going to do that, and if you want to strike it, then chase T. Higgins.
Right.
Which will cost you not twice as much, but darn, it's going to
cost you a lot.
30 plus $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I did something on Pierce and Mitchell posted it yesterday, and just how the opposed seasons they had with Pierce and going off the charts with his big plays and Mitchell not. And I had to check the stat 3 times. They had 3 players with 800 yards. The Colts did 800 yards receiving.
Mm-hmm.
That's only the second time in franchise history they've done that. And the other time was Marvin, Reggie, and Brandon Stokely.
Okay.
Wow.
So it's not like they weren't. And this is in a passing offense that was just hit and miss with the doggone quarterback.
47% completion percentage with the number one quarterback.
So, again, I wouldn't be opposed to it only if you were able to address the other issues almost before that. Because if you do this, it's going to limit what you can do. It just does.
Right. Yeah.
Would you rather have one of the rookie tight ends in the draft instead of Cooper Kupp? Which I realize if you do the rookie in the draft, it's going to be a modest contract, and you'll have him for 4 years, so it's not like it's you can't do both. But I just think there's those 3 or 4 areas, at least 3 areas that I really want him to hit big time before you consider adding a Cooper Kupp.
Mm-hmm. And for me, if you want to add a dynamic playmaker on the outside, great. If you find a receiver from a team that has salary cap trouble and you can trade for him, like if the 49ers want to get rid of Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, I mean, those guys are more playmakers than Cooper Kupp is right now. They're younger than he is. I think they could provide more of a dynamic change to your team right now. Now, Ayuk, in a year or two, his contract jumps up to like $40 million a year. They just signed him to an extension. So, I mean, I'm just naming names. I'm not thinking about contracts right now. But like if the Falcons, for example, like I know that they need to shed some salary, and they're not going to do. I don't think they'd do this, but if they want to part with either Kyle Pitts or Drake London, then why would they do that? Because they're trying to develop their young quarterback, Michael Penix. So I don't see why they would. But again, I'm saying like those are the type of players that I think you want to have an eye on in the DeForest Buckner type fold. And if you want to get them on your team, trading for them is probably the best option because in free agency, like we've been talking about, these guys, if they want to go to a contender, it's not going to be the Colts. If they want to get paid big bucks, is that going to be from the Colts? Like, how much is Chris Ballard really going to change, especially when it comes to offensive playmakers, that he's always been the type of guy that's tried to build in-house? Like, how much can he truly change in just one offseason? Exactly everything he wants to do. So Cooper Kupp might be the extent of what he's willing to do.
And one thing that for us to sit here and either write about or talk about on what the free agent market is, we don't know.
Right.
Last week we didn't know that Myles Garrett, not free agency, but might be available, or Cooper Kupp. So we don't know whenever the teams have their meetings. Man, Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly,
right,
who's going to be on the market, and he will get interest. He will. So other teams are going to have the same thing, to where they're either going to have a guy they're not going to re-sign, or somebody they've got to cut. New Orleans might cut their whole half their roster,
right? Because you have to, right?
Yeah. So you don't know what the market is. T. Higgins, what's going to happen there? Derek Carr, these quarterbacks, Sam Darnold. You don't know what teams are going to do, but it's really interesting to think about how they would fit in here. And I know Chris Ballard always chuckles when he, it's like fantasy football. Well, that's not what this is,
right?
That's not what the real world is,
right?
But it's fun to talk about.
It certainly is, and it gives us a little bit of content to get us through the month of February here, as the Colts are sitting at home, getting ready to watch the Super Bowl like the rest of us, as the Eagles and the Chiefs are down in New Orleans, along with our very own intrepid reporter Chris Hagan, who has been at the Super Bowl for many years now, and quite a few in a row.
Kind of like you in Jacksonville.
Exactly. It's like the annual trip from Dave to Jacksonville, the annual trip for Hagan to the Super Bowl. One of them is typically more exciting than the other, and I will let you all figure out which one that is. Lou Anarumo is filling out his staff for the Colts defense. Chris Hewitt joined the group. He'll be the secondary coach and pass game coordinator. Hewitt has been with the Baltimore Ravens since 2012, quite a while back there. He held the positions of assistant head coach, pass game coordinator, and secondary coach there in Baltimore.
I was wondering, and I didn't look into it that much, but assistant head coach, did they give him that title to keep him from moving?
He got it a couple of years ago, so I'm assuming
normally
that's
what you do.
Case.
So because
right.
you can't really go to a lateral move.
Yeah, right.
Maybe even coordinator. I don't know.
I was kind of surprised reading the background on that, mostly for that reason, because those teams will designate a guy, an assistant head coach, to keep him from going elsewhere because they want to keep him.
The funny thing about this move is, who is going to Baltimore to be the senior secondary coach?
Chucky.
That's right, Chuck Pagano. Returning to the fold.
He's a lifer.
He is 100%.
He's a younger Tom Moore.
I enjoyed him a lot on podcasts, the Pat McAfee show that he does, any type of media work.
He was more open.
Exactly, he was always more open than he was with us, for sure. Like, and I don't say that as a dig at him. That's part of your job as a head coach. You need to be a little bit more reserved.
Not be open.
Exactly. You need to find a balance of not being open, but not throwing your best players on the team under the bus and saying that they're just a little sore in week 17 or 18. So there's some ground in there that has to be found between those two extremes in order to do your job to the best of your ability as a head coach. And I don't know why I picked out that example. It could have been from anyone. But anyway, Chuck Pagano back in the league. Congrats to him. And like you said, Chap, really a football lifer. And it seemed like even though he was good in the media, that his calling was always to go back to being a coach.
And it's okay to be. And again, his resume. If you just take his name off, and you looked at his resume as a head coach, you think, why did this guy never get a second chance? Because it's a winning record, playoffs, a couple of playoff wins, AFC Championship game. But Chuck, I think, he's just he's much better at being a position coach, whether it's secondary, a coordinator, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with your calling being as an assistant coach as opposed to a head coach as opposed to a coordinator position coach. And good for Chuck. He's a lifer. He loves it. It's part of his DNA, and he'll do a good job there. He's going to a team he knows well and is pretty well stocked.
And Chris Hewitt comes here to the Colts. He previously coached at Notre Dame and Rutgers before he joined the Ravens back in 2012. And he was also part of that Ravens Super Bowl winning staff in the 2012 season with the elite quarterback Joe Flacco and everyone else on that Ravens roster back then. The Hall of Fame class will be announced Thursday night. So by the time you listen to this podcast, it might even be out by then.
Be out by then.
I'm sure we will talk at length about that next week in the process. But Chap can lend some insight into the process this year because he is in the room where it happens, and the votes come out with 15 modern era finalists. I'll go down those names quickly. Cornerback Eric Allen, defensive end Jarrett Allen, tackle Willie Anderson, guard Jari Evans, tight end Antonio Gates, wide receiver Torrey Holt, linebacker Luke Kuechly, quarterback Eli Manning, wide receiver Steve Smith, outside linebacker / defensive end Terrell Suggs, running back Fred Taylor, kicker Adam Vinatieri, wide receiver Reggie Wayne, safety Darren Woodson, and offensive lineman Marshall Ianda. Those are the finalists. It was cut down from that. You guys made your vote. And it's a mystery shrouded in an enigma right now as to who will be in the class of 2025.
Normally, we the selectors know who the 5 are,
right?
Because it's the way it works, and we're not going to spend too much time in the weeds. Is you get 15 finalists, we talk and debate and argue and all this, and then we cut from 15 to 10, argue some more, and then we've cut from 10 to 5. And once you get to 5, then it's kind of like up or down, yes or no. And almost always you get 5 guys in because if they get that far, you need to have a real reason not to vote for a guy. This year, we went from 15 to 10 to 7 to 5. And when you get to 7, you vote, each of us, there were 49 of us, each of us vote for 5 guys. So all I know is who the 7 were. But I don't know who got the votes at 5. And when you add the 7 in there, you can maybe only get 4 guys in because they've got to get 80% of the vote.
Okay.
So it's conceivable somebody doesn't get enough votes because it's spread out. And
so they're going to create even more of a logjam, perhaps.
And that's the unintended consequences. If somebody said, well, one of the guys on the board, well, we want to make sure that guys get 80%. It's a firm vote and all this. Well, but the problem is then maybe only 4 guys get in, so you're pushing another guy back into the list.
Right.
And if you make the cut to 7 and then you don't get in, you automatically are on the 15 list for next year. Mm-hmm. So if Marshall Ianda, if he made it to 7 and doesn't get in, then he's one of the finalists next year.
Interesting.
So all you're doing is pushing people forward.
Right.
And that 7 number, that's proprietary to the Pro Football Writers, right?
Correct.
Like that's not, they didn't.
They have not announced that.
There was not an additional cut down that was publicly announced.
Right. And again, I checked with the guys at the Hall of Fame because I don't want to lose my position, but we can talk about the process. We can't talk about who made it. Yeah, I know 9 guys that didn't make it. But I don't know the guys that made it. And I know the guys who didn't make it from 15 to 10, but it's just they really want confidentiality, and it's their football, so they can do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just making sure that when I was looking up information, I did not see a cut down to 7 because that is not public information.
And it can be public. We can talk about it after the fact that this guy did make the cut to 7, but then he didn't make it,
or he didn't get 80%, or what have you,
or because I know one guy who made it to 7 that didn't make the class this year, and I wasn't going to make more calls because sometimes when you have information, you want to use it,
right?
And I would do that for my last time, which I wouldn't do. But no, it's and here's Reggie with his 6th straight time as a finalist, final 15, and I did do some research, and there's not been many guys who have gone beyond 6 and not get in. I think John Lynch was like 8 straight years as a finalist, and and I remember talking to Reggie at the end of the season, and he's so over this process. He just doesn't, and he was good. If he doesn't get in, he said, this will be the one that hurts the most because it's in New Orleans.
Yeah.
His hometown.
Yeah.
And he remembers that Edge went in South Florida.
Right.
So, but in Vinny, again, one thing I can mention is again, the presentation that we give the local guy in the market talks about their player. And I talked about Reggie again, and his stats are the same as they always were. But one thing I did notice is again, the one I pound home was only 2 players ranked top 10 regular season, postseason. It's Reggie and Jerry Rice. And Reggie has more receiving yards and receptions and touchdowns in the postseason all time than the last 3 Hall of Fame receivers we've put in. Andre Johnson, Isaac Bruce, and who am I forgetting? I don't know who the third guy is. But for some reason there's been a pushback on Reggie. I don't know if it's a Colts fatigue. I think that's part of it.
Might be. They've had a number.
You guys only won one, and you get all these guys in there. So, but Vinatieri, Ron Borges from the New England area presented Vinny, and then I sort of seconded it. And what I just said is, if this was any other player at any other position, you'd tell me to mention his name and then sit down. Because first ballot guys, which Vinny, this is his first year, they need to be sort of clean. It just needs to be a resume. You say, yeah, that's Hall of Fame. It's 4 Super Bowls. It'd be 1-2, all-time leading scorer, all-time leading field goals and comebacks, and the 2 kicks he made against the Raiders in
still absurd that he made
2001.
Yeah,
that's the first year that New England won a Super Bowl. Maybe they go ahead and win multiple, but they wouldn't win their first one then. So we'll see. It'll be announced Thursday night. I think it's at 9:00 on NFL Honors, and people will be complaining or celebrating or whatever. And one thing I remind people: if it's 5 people and you don't agree with it, and you say, well, they should have put this guy on, well, then which guy are you taking off? No one wants to take a player off. They just want to put somebody on.
Right.
So
right.
But they're all great players. The Eli Mannings. I will say that the longest debate we had was for Eli Manning. The back and forth, and is he first ballot worthy and all this. So very interesting discussions.
Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt finalists for the 6th time. Jared Allen finalist for the 5th time. So those guys have kind of been stacking up.
Yeah, I think of the list of the 15, I don't think anybody was more than 3 years other than those 3 players.
Those guys. All right. Well, obviously those are guys that are held in high esteem,
right?
But
just can't get over the hump for whatever reason.
Exactly. So I've always found it unique, like comparing the Pro Football Hall of Fame to like the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame and how they do it. The Baseball Hall of Fame is so much more selective, like highly selective. If you get 2 guys a year, sometimes that seems like a lot. And also, well, they're ridiculous. Like not having anyone except Mariano Rivera be
was Jeter or not?
He missed it by 1.
Yeah. So did Ichiro.
And Ichiro this year missed it by 1.
In
what world do you not vote for those guys for the Hall of Fame?
And do you just want to say no one should be first ballot?
Right.
Well, what are you talking about?
So never become that guy, Chap, is what I'm saying.
Hank Aaron. I mean, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle. I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Bob Gibson. I just don't get it. And one thing that there's a major difference in the two, baseball and football, is baseball consider off the field stuff, the PEDs and all that stuff,
right.
Steroids. Football sort of doesn't. It sort of doesn't.
Terrell Owens, I will say, kind of got like 1 year to say next year.
I was one of those too. Because
I remember you talking about it on this podcast.
His was like a couple of suspensions, and he was traded, and he was just a disruptive force. And that's on field. That impacts your on field. And that's why I say, in my mind, first ballot, man, you just have to be clean. You just have to have. And then I say that, and then Julius Peppers got in,
right? Fair.
And he had a PED.
He did
a 4-game PED. So, but they really, whenever we've had our debates, and someone starts going astray on, well, he did this, and the guy will say, no, this is on field. So, and you can argue whether something's on field or off field, but the pro football is very much what you did between the lines and in the locker room, I guess. Baseball, it's a character thing as well.
Michael Pittman's making the rounds at the Super Bowl. There is a famous radio row where, I don't know, hundreds of radio stations line up.
A lot of people out there.
And hundreds more people pushing something.
That might be the biggest change in media down there, is how big Media Row has grown.
Yep.
It's just a total industry now with people.
For sure. Well, Michael Pittman Jr. is making the rounds down there right now. He spoke to our Chris Hagan, and we've got some interviews with him that we're airing here on Fox 59, CBS 4 Indy over the next couple days. Might go with like a full, longer version of him this weekend on one of our sports overtime shows, Friday night on Fox 59 or Sunday night as well. We will find out what exactly the plan is. I'm just here for the first day this week. I'm just off my my normal weekend. So I have no idea what we're doing. I just come in, I sit down, and I start talking about the Colts, and like, okay, we'll go from here. But anyway, Michael Pittman Jr. made a couple appearances. He was on PFT Live. He spoke with Yahoo Sports. Obviously, like I said, he spoke with our Chris Hagan. But some things about his discussions. Obviously, Anthony Richardson comes up, and Pittman thought that Richardson responded well to his benching this season. He didn't fold, didn't break down. Pittman saying, I really do think he wants to be the best version of himself. So good news to hear. Not going out and trashing your starting quarterback.
It's going to be like, oh, he folded like tissue paper.
Exactly. I can't believe it was only 2 games suspension. It should have been a month.
It should have been 7. Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't get any of that, which is always good. Pitt said that he and the leaders got together and talked about how everyone needed to be better. And that's not specifically about Richardson. I know our last point was about Richardson, but that's just in general, the entire team, which needed to happen. Like we talked about this, and we talked about it throughout last season, that there were failures of the leadership of this team. Really, you could stretch it out to a couple years, in my opinion. That
maybe they don't need 7 captains.
That's quite possible.
I wondered about that too, Chap.
Maybe they don't need a rookie to be a captain as well, even if he's a quarterback. Maybe all those things.
Make him play a game.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Exactly.
Because I was thinking about that too. Like it's weird. Like we're going to get all the team captains together to discuss one of the guys that you're discussing is a team captain.
That's true. Yeah, that is kind of funny.
But almost 10% of your team's a captain.
Yeah,
it's talking about.
You don't need quite that much.
3 or 4 is good.
It's okay to have leaders who aren't captains.
That's okay. It's all right, man.
It's okay.
Right.
Like it's okay if one of Ryan Kelly or Quentin Nelson is not a captain. Like you could have one on the offensive line. That's fine, and the other guy is still highly respected in the locker room. Like that's cool. No worries. All good. Anyway. Pittman, talking to Yahoo Sports about how the team needs to focus on finishing and play complementary football.
Obviously, he's been listening to the podcast.
That's right.
Because those are the things we talked about a lot this season.
Thank you, Pitt. We appreciate your listening and your download and subscribing to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. Gets delivered to your podcast listening device.
He's milking the cows on his farm. He can listen to our podcast.
Just plug it in, plug in the headphones, and get to work when you're driving your Toyota Sequoia around. And
he's not bad in those commercials.
No, he's great.
He's just so understated that he's good.
Yeah, I like Pitt quite a bit in that category. Pitt says, when a receiver doesn't get targets in a game, it doesn't mean he's getting locked down. It just means the game didn't go his way, which is in part true. But it can also be it can also be being locked down.
And that was kind of in response to a question about, receivers. It's more about just catching the ball. There are other things that you have to do. There's hot reads and or hot routes, blocking, that sort of stuff.
Also said in process of getting better from his back injury, he said scans came back looking good. So that's a good thing. That we'll see. We'll see how much he actually participates in the offseason program.
Yeah, we knew he had a back injury most of the season.
Right.
But we didn't know the extent of it, where he told us at that the exit day that he had fractured bones in his back. And I think they said if he continued to play, it can get worse. So he continued to play. I've always wondered if Pitt is, when we're talking about captains, is he because Reggie always said, when you make that kind of money, you need to be a captain. Well, but you're either a leader or you're not. You can't make a guy a leader. You just can't.
Yeah.
Pitt's a guy, I think, that leads more by example. This is how we do it. He doesn't get in guys' faces, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
There were some young receivers before this group, the Dontre Moncriefs, that needed a leader. And I think what he had was like a young T.Y. Hilton, which, you can't come in here and be a leader. It's one of the reasons they re-signed Reggie in Andrew Luck's rookie season.
Yep.
Is they needed a leader. They needed that kind of guy. So, but no, like you mentioned earlier with Pitt, really good player. You wish he was a little more. You wish he was a little bit more. But what he did last year, playing through what was obviously a very significant back injury, spoke volumes about the kind of player he is.
You didn't enjoy seeing Dante Moncrief celebrate a 7-yard catch on 3rd and 9? You didn't like that?
I know. That was just again, and this is a guy that I'm not comparing he and Mitchell, but these guys both have enormous talent.
Yep.
And you just hate to see a guy with that kind of talent. It just doesn't come together for what commit here with the Anthony Richardson type thing. It's a commitment, understanding what it needs to be. And one thing I always go down rabbit holes, but with Mitchell is he talked about, he didn't know what it took to be a pro.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of impacted what he did. Pitt's always understood what it takes to be a pro.
Yeah, he's always understood the assignment.
He has. Mm-hmm. And we can argue whether he's more driven by stats than team success. I think he wants the balance, but he wants the ball too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a good receiver, you want the ball.
Right.
It's funny. I was going to do a story when who was the Saints guy? Michael Thomas.
Yep.
Broke Marvin's record for most catches in a season, and I was going to go to Reggie and talk to him about Marvin's season. And Reggie didn't really want to talk about it because he said, he said, I should have got more balls that year. And it was enormous. The difference was like 140 something to 50. It was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Receivers, if you're any good, you want the ball. I think Alec Pierce is really, really good about keeping it to himself. He wants the ball.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Last thing we'll do before we call it a day is Andrew Luck on the Pardon My Take show. He famously is now the general manager of Stanford football. And he allegedly has a smartphone now, too, which is a big deal.
He got rid of the flip phone, apparently.
Yes, exactly. But one other thing he did on this podcast was sign the infamous AFC finalist banner that was shown and mocked for years in different
one of the great
media.
Sports memes of the last decade.
It is. The AFC finalist banner that hung for a time in Lucas Oil Stadium, which has allegedly been sent to, not just stolen, but sent to the Pardon My Take podcast back in August of last year. Luck talked about plenty of things, but it's definitely worthwhile to go listen to because Andrew Luck, the guy is back in football now, and I think that should be hopefully an exciting thing for NFL fans is to see his involvement because he's always had many different interests, Chap, like we've talked about in the past. He's not the quote football lifer that Chuck Pagano we alluded to earlier, or certainly Peyton would be. But I'm happy to see him back in football because it's something that he enjoyed, that he took time away from for his own reasons. And now he's back in the game in some aspect.
I don't get the impression he aspires to get back in the NFL.
No, I don't think so either.
I think this is such a perfect, although having someone now shows you where we are in football in college now is where you've got somebody sort of who has been in charge of NIL.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
He's your cat guy, and it's super important. But I've always enjoyed Andrew Luck and all of the backlash, and some of it's still there. It was a selfishness on the part of the fan base, and I've even thought about it at times. How dare you rob us of what this team could have been if you'd have played?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still convinced to this day they would have made the Super Bowl a couple of times, probably won one with Andrew Luck because he was that good.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to disagree with you. And I said at the time that I thought that just the timing of it was awful, but
do it in April.
Exactly.
Do it in March.
I understand why he made the decision he made. I just thought the timing of it was just so painful for Colts fans out there, and for the Colts team,
and debilitating for the team.
Yeah.
What do you do? Yeah. You're just if you do it in March, well, okay, then in that draft we'll go after our guy, but it just was a bad timing. But it was right for him.
Mm-hmm.
It was. It was painful, but he was at peace with it. He still is at peace with it. One of my all-time favorite guys. I just wish there had been more of a career.
Mm-hmm.
That's my selfishness.
Yeah, he spoke for a little over an hour on that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I only got to listen about 20 minutes to it because I got hit with a Delphi story.
Nice.
Just kind of like Godfather 3. They pull, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Delphi's never over.
Never over. But you just tell that Luck is at peace with stuff, and he just is a very engaging guy to listen to.
So if you have the intestinal fortitude to listen to Andrew Luck talk for an hour and not relive all your old memories too harshly, then Pardon My Take podcast will be a great choice for you to hear the latest musings of the captain.
If I can remember, I'll drop the link into the description. You hear that? You hear that in actual podcasts all the time. So
yes. All right. So pay attention for that. You can read Mike Chappell's work online, fox59.com, cbs4indy.com as well. Follow us on Twitter. Mike's at mchappell51. Matt is at Statamatty. I'm at DaveG_sports.
Oh, before we go, Dave, Super Bowl pick.
Oh, Birds.
Mike?
You're voting against Pat Mahomes. I'm not.
Good for you.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs as well.
The Eagles kept the Patriots from being a three-peat just a couple years ago.
Have you got a Philly jersey that you'll wear next week if they win?
Me? I definitely have a Brian Dawkins jersey.
Well, then wear it next week.
I might do that. I might do it either way, win or lose. You ride or die.
Absolutely.
That's how it is. So
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great game. I really do.
I sincerely hope so. The game against the Patriots, the Eagles game there, and the Eagles game against the when they lost to the Chiefs a couple years ago. Both fantastic Super Bowls.
Really good. Really good Super Bowls.
I say that obviously as an Eagles fan.
It's a painful, to lose, but it was a good game.
The Chiefs are a 1.5 favorite. I think
yes, they are. They were both exceptional games. Hopefully we get another one. So for Matt and Mike, I'm Dave. Appreciate you listening. See you next week.